On November 30th, 2015, I celebrated my 14th birthday and received a copy of the new Destiny Taken King edition. I was a little upset that I didn't get Halo, a game that I played quite often at friends' houses, but about 5,000 hours of Destiny later, I'm still unsure if it was the right call from my parents. It has been nearly 7 years since that day, and a tremendous amount of things have happened within the Destiny 1 world, and I want to talk about the scene since September 2017, the release of Destiny 2. Both in and outside of the game world, the game is nothing like it used to be. Raiding, PvP, speedrunning, LFG, everything is a complete reinvention of the past for both good and bad. I, along with some of my comrades, will give a retrospective of the half-decade time of developer-free Destiny. Day 1 of Destiny 2 had little effect on D1 operations as people got a feel for the game, but likely weren't committing to one or the other yet. However, that transition to D2 exclusively didn't take too long to manifest. At the time, all I noticed was considerably longer Crucible queues, and game modes like Salvage and Rift would sometimes never get a lobby. LFG had slowed down to a degree, but over 100 posts was still a thing despite none of them being for Trials of Osiris. The serious decline really only began as DLCs were released on D2, and additional content was a very desirable quality that D1 rarely saw and hadn't even seen at all since Age of Triumph. And while none of them could really compare to the insanity that was Taken King, it was probably the point in time where one could identify a nosedive in the player base. This period in time is not exactly when the game could be considered dead, however. That wouldn't really become a thing until Destiny 2 was years into its life. Taken King is widely considered the greatest, most impactful DLC in the franchise's history, and if you ask those same players what the next best one is, a good chunk of them would say D2's Forsaken DLC. Forsaken really made up for the lackluster DLCs that preceded it, and it was the spark to reignite the interest in Destiny 2 for people. That was when you could really tell the game was only going downhill and began to represent the state of the game today. Although this all didn't come with some learning points for the D1 community, the devs stated that the game wouldn't be updated anymore, and that came with the relief that weekly resets wouldn't go away. Weekly raid rotation, modifications on strikes, vendor roles, they would still change every Tuesday. Even Xur still came around on weekends. But not every reset was still a thing. And for that, we will continue to Chapter 2. How has PvP changed for you since Destiny 2 was released?
Less players, less lobbies, it takes a lot longer. It really depends on the weekly game mode. I find that you can't go into the Crucible Select and find the selection of games as fast as the weekly game mode. And I feel like a lot more people play when it's like Clash, 2v2, or Rumble, stuff like that.
Despite my legacy in this game residing exclusively in raids, I might still have more than half my playtime spent in the confines of the Crucible. I mean, just look at the absurd collection of raid report red dots I accumulated in my early days compared to the how many god-rolled PvP weapons are in my arsenal. So I hope you find my thoughts in this segment of having the slightest bit of value. As the game stands today, there will be upwards of 3 lobbies across all game modes, and they will all be in the weekly playlist. And that's if you're on a weekend afternoon. Weekly reset might generate a little bit of buzz, but if you want to find a supremacy or salvage game, then I'm sorry, you're playing the wrong video game. Crucible Quartermaster bounties can be completed within the week, but Shaxx bounties are incredibly limited in their ability to be completed at all. Games are composed of maybe 10 people when it's not Mayhem Rumble Week. You're only going to find the same 50 guys across all of them anyway, and that's only if those people get bored of staring at the 11 LFG posts for the last hour. Of course, this is worlds apart from what we used to experience on a weekly basis back in the Destiny Crucible, and there's an enormous reason as to why it is one of the first things to plummet in popularity. Would you want Trials, Iron Banner, seasonal events, stuff like that, to come back?
Yes, absolutely. Because I missed out on some of the seasonal things because of how late I started playing. And I only played Iron Banner for a short time, so of course I didn't get all the weapons and the stuff that I wanted on them, you know. And Trials, I only played Trials once maybe, and that was on my Hunter, so I don't have any of the cool looking Titan gear, plus the ornamented shit. I'd love to do that. It'd be fun, because PvP is a lot of fun.
PvP is fun. Upon the release of Destiny 2, they instead had Trials of the Nine, which was a 4v4 with altered rule sets and mechanics, some of which were looked at as negatives in the early game. Trials of Osiris still would have been the preference for a great many players, and would remain a staple as to why people would play this game even to this day. But nearing the end of Destiny's life, the biggest game in the franchise, Trials, along with Iron Banner, would both be removed for good. This was a real head-scratcher for everyone, as weapon and armor vendor roles, weekly heroic strike and mission modifiers, raid and challenge week, and the weekly featured Crucible game mode would still maintain their regular rotation cycle. So why wouldn't Iron Banner and Trials be able to maintain their regular cycle as well? We were never given a direct answer from Bungie, but it was viewed as a tactic to get players to come over to D2. That didn't make a ton of sense, since 99% of people were already going to be going over there regardless, especially when they made the game free to play. But this is just another wonderful example of Bungie being the most short-sighted company on the face of the earth. I mean, come on, how is this a repeating thing for half a decade? Every time Bungie makes an announcement for new content, it's just them bringing shit back from D1, and in case you haven't noticed by the length of the video, they haven't updated this game in ages. Eventually, you're gonna run out of shit to haul over from your terrible little brother version of Destiny 1, because we both know that there's no universe out there in which you can be left to your own devices to make a successful game. Hey, remember when they made Curse of Osiris? Boy, what a DLC that was. Oh, I forgot, they followed it up with another slam dunk in the Warmind DLC. I was so bored I forgot to yawn while sulking through it for a few hours. As soon as King's Fall came to D2, I literally said, they're gonna just change things for the worse, and to be honest, I don't really see people enjoying a raid they already complete less than 20% of the time anyway. And after spending weeks reading post after post on LFG about how they were practicing for D2, not knowing that building bad habits is worse than building no habits at all, and like their fucking 16 orb stripe and saying switch every 30 seconds on totems, which was miserable for any D1 player with an IQ of over 6 putting up with their shit. And wouldn't you know it, I was dead right. It's almost like a person who formerly held the world record speedrun for it, has been playing the raid for 6 years, and has exactly 500 hours of King's Fall playtime at the time I am writing this, would have a better idea as to what players would think of their fucked up choices than they do themselves. And don't even get me started on their Fortnite hype train riding asses adding a fucking battle pass. I mean, what's next? They're gonna add a battle royale mode? Okay, moving on. I am absolutely certain that this is a section that a number of people are bored of hearing about from me, but it does require discussing. Raiding as a concept is a shell of itself. However, the speedrunning scene is a complete reinvention of what it was back in the day. I'll go over a few things in this segment: general raiding behavior changes, the evolution of the average player, and the new heights we have reached in both departments. What are LFG raiding behavior changes you've seen over the last couple of years?
Okay. So...
He's got rant time.
I call them LFG eras. Year 1, Year 2, there was I call it the Wild West frontier of the LFGs. Because there was no real like site or manner to. You
went to the tower and found people who with a high Grimoire score.
Exactly. You go to the towers. You would try and find people that had high Grimoire, high light level, and you would look at their armors to see what they have. And then if they had good stuff, you would send invites, and sometimes you get great players, sometimes not so much. It was one of those hit and misses, most definitely. It was harder to find out. It was easier to go in like friends and teams than it was to try and find an LFG. And if you're lucky and you're good enough, you'll bump into an LFG that will accept you and they're good, and then they will put you into their group, and then they will start they'll have like a messenger, or like they add you as friends, and then it was like small interactions like that. But it was very wild because you didn't know who you're gonna get.
That was a coin flip. Every single person you interacted with.
It really was. Sometimes people had to look for via strikes, and there was always one thing that always stood out. After 6 months, you always had to have at least 2 weapons. You had to either have a Fatebringer, a Vision Confluence, or the Year 1 Gallahorn.
Year 1
Those were
Gallahorn,
musts.
the goat.
Those were musts. And then when Crota came out, the Holy Trinity of weapons that everybody always wanted you to have was either a Vision or a Fatebringer, a Black Hammer, which is the legendary version of what is now the Black Spindle, and a Gallahorn. If you had those 3 and you go into an LFG, if you said you had those, you're automatically in, irregardless of whether you had skill or not. This was also during the 360 days. So in the 360 days, there was a lot of people who did it, that did raids very cheesily. But we're talking about LFGs. We'll talk about that later. So that was the era. That was the first era. I call that the Frontier LFG era.
Mm-hmm.
Then LFG.net and LFG.com started to make an appearance, and those 2 sites came when I experienced them. That started year 3, year 4. It might have been year 2, but I think I started using it in year 3 of Destiny, and it was so much easier to find someone. But there was like an etiquette for LFGs then. You had to say your light level and the character that you were going in, and weapons that you needed. That you had. So that era, it wasn't very relaxing, but there was a lot of people who were accepting people who were coming in. They would do cheeses for Kuroda and Vogue Avion. I call that era the discovery era, like LFG discoveries. Everything was relatively pleasant. People were doing speed runs. They would post for speed runs, and people would post for raids, strikes, or EVT trials, all of that stuff. So it was relatively organized, and it was still a very growing community and a very accepting community still.
What are your thoughts, at least compared to what you have said thus far on LFG, to the state it's in now?
Oh, from the state where it is right now, with Xbox now having LFGs, there was a couple of changes from that too. When it first came out, people were still using LFG.net, LFG.com, and I'm sure they still do. But at least for the players on the Xbox, as soon as that post started coming up on Xbox, a lot of people started using that more often because it was more convenient. The thing is that people at that time, that was like year 4 or 5, people were now not only just looking for experienced players, but they were looking at Groomer stores, at D1 Raid Report. That became a huge thing in the rating, at least in the rating scene, and a lot of people judge people by the amount of raids they've completed or did not complete.
A tragedy in this world.
So it was because like it did alienate the newer players that wanted to learn, and some of the more veteran raiding LFG groups, they would shy away from people who didn't really know what they're doing, and there wasn't as many people that were willing to teach. There were Sherpas, like there were on LFG.net. There was a checkmark that had people willing to Sherpa or teach players. On LFG, on Xbox, they didn't have that modifier. So there was a lot of separation between the two. And then now, most teams that I bumped into, at least the people that I go into, some players, if they're really competitive or they've been there for a long time, they'll go to D1 report to check you. But with how small the community is now, most teams that I bump into is willing to teach to a certain point, up to a certain number of time, and then after a while they just get tired, burnt out, and then people will just leave. So there's a bit more tolerance for newer players in that sense.
While LFG looks like that of an outdated Madden game, that isn't to say the quality hasn't been lost in the process. The average raider today is far more talented than the ones in 2017 for sure. If you post a raid, it's pretty likely that everyone knows what they're going to be doing, and they can do a great majority of the positions within it, perhaps even being able to do more complicated things like two-manning totem sides or triple cannon or bomb for access. Carrying still exists for people because people will return to D1 who have not gotten to 400 light, or they're giving the game a shot after playing D2 for ages. So it's not like only good players remain in the game, but finding people in LFG who can do shit like breaching or put up 2 million damage on access isn't all that irregular. Average completion time and percentage are both up from the player purge. Players are better than ever, but the largest difference has to be seen at the very top. This topic gives me a tremendous amount of mixed feelings and discomfort, but this isn't about me. This is, for the most part, an objective look at the speedrunning community and its evolution in the last half-decade. Let's first talk about what it was before this current day. This might be the biggest hot take you'll hear from me, not only in this video but on this channel as well. Speedrunners before Destiny 2's release weren't actually good. Here's what I mean by that. Not only with hindsight now, but even back then, it's clear that Destiny speedrunning is completely different from any other community. We'll expand on this later, but in this specific aspect, it is very clear that speedrunners made almost no advancements in strategies. The key to speedrunning back in the early days was dumbed down to get from place to place quickly and kill bosses fast. Everything else was mimicking what LFG did in the time. Let's just talk about Wrath in this section for now. Dark Drinker at Axis, while Unto Dust was already in the game, Tether and Sleeper at Vosik, while Melting Point was an ability for over a year. Everything was just surface level knowledge, and nobody even tried to think outside the box for ages. It was kind of hard to watch back in those days, because they were considered the top grade of player, but they were kind of average looking back at them. If any of them were to return today, the current speeders would absolutely eat them alive. I have personally played with some of them in the recent years, and they don't come off as anything special, and I've met some LFGs that I would probably take over them. It's not their fault for how that is now, but back then, an extreme lack of innovation is borderline embarrassing. This is why when anybody asks me about players in this age, I describe it as Destiny 1 has a very low skill floor, but the skill ceiling isn't all that much higher. Regardless of the talent pool of the time, speedrunning wasn't too huge for the average player. Not many teams were doing record pushes, and it was a monopoly of Cruelty, Baxley, and even Sweatsicle to a degree. They ended up getting massive channels from doing it that still reel in views from their D2 content, but their channels didn't really spark intrigue from the average player to join the speedrunning community the way people like Andrew G, Darbian, and Cosmic would do in games like Super Mario Bros. Now, if my opinion's out of the way, I can bring us to the current decade and the speedrunning evolution that has developed since. Breaching was, and is, by far the most groundbreaking technique not only in speedrunning, but perhaps in Destiny history, as it broke the floodgates wide open for speedrunning. Insane developments like 4.2, Abyss Skip, Gorgon's Maze Breach, and Special Box have been time saves that range from big saves to game changers for speedrunning at both a budget and record level. At first glance, it seems impossible to do, especially if you listen to Evan F. describe it, but it can be learned, if not mastered, within a couple hours. I've seen people hit it on attempt 1 before. But this isn't about breaching, and speedrunning isn't just breaching. It used to work as you would still require 5 Titans and a Hunter because of Bubble, Skating, and Tether, because that was just the surface level knowledge of that day and age, but now it's Sunbreaker, Sunbreaker, and more Sunbreaker. Warlocks are welcome in 3 of the 4 raids for Song of Flame and Touch of Flame to primarily empower the other titans. Bubble is still used everywhere in King's Fall, but Hunters were introduced due to the value of Celestial Nighthawk, something that wasn't introduced in the last few years, despite these exotics existing for ages at this point. Testing theoretical strategies in breach locations are all over the place, even within LFGs. World records are minutes lower than what the outer limit was stated back in 2016, and time saves are still known or have been tested to lower those records even further. This is pretty typical for speedrunning in almost every game, but this is where things take a turn for the worse. Some viewers may find this next segment disturbing. If you either speedrunned with me back in 2020, or maybe unsure if the topic ahead is unsafe for you, then please skip to Chapter 5 from here. For those who show interest in becoming speedrunners, this is for you.
I don't think I'm that good at the game. I'm better than the average player, but that's just because I play more, I've put in more time. It's not like I'm more talented or something. It's just if you work at something, you'll be better. And honestly, the speedrunning, it's just not my sort of thing. I don't like there's a lot of negativity in it. People get angry. And that's just not why I play the game. I play the game to have fun, and that is not the environment that I want. Some people like it, and as long as you're with the right people, that's all good.
This is not just a documentary about the gameplay, but also about the people within it and the community outside of it. In terms of the people that continue to speedrun this game to this decade, they are some of the worst and most miserable people I have encountered in my over 2 decades of life. Attacks on the families and livelihoods of players, collaboration between rival raid groups nearly forbidden, toxicity only rivaled by Minecraft Roblox. I'm serious. Almost no other speedrunning community acts this way, and if the developers were to come back and create a poll to remove everything speedrunning related, and even for Xbox to ban those in the speedrunning community who terrorize the Destiny, I could say I would be the first person in line to vote yes. For the aspiring players who think that speedrunning might be the activity for them, I'm going to give you a couple warnings here. If you cannot match the toxicity shared between everybody at the top, you will not last. There is one individual who was actually a bit of a friend of mine who got the 23:58 King's Fall world record with me back in 2020 that decided that living was not worth the harassment and corruption from those at the top and is no longer with us. This is not a joking matter. There is no topic I could be more serious about. When I was speedrunning in the summer of 2020, I was at the peak of the relationship I had with my best friend Trinity, the person who I care about more than anyone else and plan to spend the rest of my life with. I reflect on that time period as one of the worst in my entire life, due to the sadistic nature of the people I was surrounded by, and considered making attempts on my own life because of it. The reason I tell people to avoid any form of speedrunning is because I would not wish the mental torment I suffered on anyone, and I don't want people to be responsible for more of that torment as well. If you understand these risks and still want to join the speedrunners, then I cannot stop you. But please tread with caution, and do not say you were not warned.
I don't think that Destiny 1 will ever be popular again. That's just not feasible. It's not likely. Bungie is going to stick with Destiny to going forward. I don't even think you should hope for that. And I think that's good. It's always good to move on, improve. If people are liking it, then that's good. It's just not my game. And that's fine.
At the time of writing this, Destiny currently has 8 viewers on Twitch on a Sunday night. The Destiny game category has 1.2 million followers at the same time. Destiny 1 content creator videos popping off on YouTube constitutes less than 10,000 views. Stats like this were unthinkable back in the day, but this is the reality of it. The days of 150,000 active viewers on Twitch, over 100 LFG posts, and near instant Crucible queues are well in the past. This game really is dead. There's no way around that. With Destiny 2 still having an active player base and actual dev attention, there's little chance of any return to greatness. Although it should be mentioned that little chance doesn't mean there's zero chance. So what would a dev return to D1 actually look like? Outside of obvious things like players returning to the game, glitches like breaching would no doubt be one of the first things to go out the window, single-handedly killing the chances of speedrun records being lowered from their current times, making the glitchless category, at least temporarily, the only category that one can run 6-man. PDR, part glitch, relic solo slam, the cannon glitch will surely be phased out, and it might even take out things in the gray zone like power slide, the Golgoroth pillar, and 100 times weight of darkness. But that's just things that players are able to do. things like false threat mine detonations, immortal ads, literally the entirety of Crota's End will be given a look at the very least. If updates started coming back to Destiny 1, is that a welcome concept to you?
I would say, as long as they are willing to listen to, really listen to input of the player base when it comes to that, that would most definitely spark interest. Depending on what they do, if they're bringing back content that they removed, like trials, sparrow racing, the seasonal events that they used to have, then yes, most definitely. Quality of life improvements most definitely would be nice. If they brought in new content itself, as long as it's in continuity of the storyline, in my opinion, then yes, most definitely I would definitely welcome it.
Last point on the return of the developers. Should that happen, are there specific aspects to Destiny 1 that you would like to be phased out?
To be phased out? Ooh, that is a very good question. One thing that they had taken out that they implemented was what they had done before then on the 360 was that if the fire team leader accepted the game invite, he will not only bring himself, but he'll bring anybody that's within his fire team to the person that sent the game invite.
I literally completely forgot about that being a mechanic.
It was, yeah. It was a small mechanic, and on the one hand, it does make it easier so that people who don't want to join can just stay out of it. But it was a cool mechanic in the fact that you're flying with your team to the team that needs help. That was just a thing that that's how I always looked at it. It's not groundbreaking. As far as removals, I would like them to implement something to remove primary synth. Not like remove them from the game, but just like how you can use special and heavy to use for reputation boost. I would hope that they would do something for primary synth, or like a reputational boost or something. And the only reason why I say that is because I've been slowly working my way down from my hundreds upon hundreds of primary synth. And the only real way to remove it quickly is to delete a character and have it stacked in that character.
Yeah, and it goes away with them.
Yes. So that's just a personal peeve because I've had about 900 primary synth and I had to slowly work my way down from it. So yeah, that would be something
that would have saved you some time.
It would, most definitely.
It is unlikely that new Destiny content would come to the game, as that would still be a thing exclusively residing in D2. But as it stands, the game is still incredibly fun to play. While the community has areas to improve, it doesn't take away from the fact that the game had a prolific history, and while the future may seem dim, we can still look on the past for great memories. Every player who has memories with the game in the first few years of its life retains some aspect of that nostalgia that keeps them tethered to the game in one way or another. Whether they exclusively play D2, go back and forth between the games in the franchise, or are diehard Destiny 1 enjoyers, we can all give thanks to the fact that Destiny has provided so much for us. So thank you, Destiny. For the good and the bad, the triumph and failure, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Destiny, for being a lovely game.
Thank you so much for everything that you've done. To all the people who are watching, I hope you guys enjoyed this documentary. Have a good morning, afternoon, good night, wherever you are. See you around.
I like to teach the world to sing. Sing with me.